Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Multiple topics today, Landis. We're going to talk about the college football playoff. We're going to talk about Iowa State losing offensive coordinator Nathan Shieldhouse. We're going to talk about Penn State Stadium. We're going to talk about where Northwestern is going to play this year. Ohio State hiring James Laurinaitis. But we want to start with the college football playoff. And the report's out as we record this on Thursday morning. We're out on Wednesday. Everybody wrote what's going to happen in the meeting? Again, nothing better than meeting coverage. College football meeting coverage. What's going to happen in this meeting as the power brokers in college football got together? And one of the things that came out, according to reports, is the idea of expanding the 12-team playoff to 14 teams very soon. We are going to be at 12 teams in this season and in 2025, but maybe they could get to 14 teams starting in 2026. What do you think of the idea of 14 teams?
It's a weird number. I don't know why. If you're going to expand, doing it to 16, I think makes much more sense. But mostly I think can't we just see what a 12-team playoff looks like before we decide to expand to 14? And it's not that I'm anti-playoff expansion necessarily. I just it feels unnecessary to announce or I guess discuss that you're going to do that when we don't even know what the first expanded playoff is going to look like. It just seems like change for change's sake in my mind, especially at that number of 14. 16 I think is a number I can wrap my head around a little easier, which I think makes more sense. But I don't know. I just feel like they're trying to show that they're doing stuff by saying, hey, maybe we'll go to 14 now. It's let's watch the 12 first and see what happens with that before we decide to go to 14.
So the one thing that I think, it's not adding a round, which is the important thing. You're not asking any champion to win an extra game. So you are just expanding the number of teams that would potentially have to play 4 games to win a national title instead of 3. You're just reducing the number of buys in the first round. I don't think they will ever's a long time. I don't think they'll ever expand the number of rounds. I don't think you could get to 24 or what, in a world where I got to win 5 games, right? Mm-hmm. To win 5 games in the playoff with what's already in place in the regular season. So it's just about buys. This is just a buy discussion. Do you want to make the 3 seed and the 4 seed play an extra game? And we're going to talk about what the SEC and the Big Ten are doing here. But the reason that you would want to do it is because as it's structured right now, the 4 conference champs in the Power 4 are going to get 4 buys. So what you are doing, who are going to be the top 2 seeds? The SEC champ and the Big Ten champ. They still get the buys. What this would do is make the Big 12 champ and the ACC champ play an at-large SEC or Big Ten team in the first round and potentially be out. It just is a chance to advance more SEC and Big Ten teams right off the bat. You just sort of think, are you making a principled stand on why are you changing something that we haven't even seen yet? Is it just a take a chill pill stance, or is it something inherent about the structure of 14 versus 12 that you don't like?
No, it's more take a chill pill. I think I guess I don't like separating the Big Ten and the SEC as something more substantial than the rest of the sport. If you want to do that, then just do it. But in the world where you're all still playing the same game, I don't necessarily like punishing, I guess, for lack of a better word, the Big 12 or the ACC champ for not being in the Big 10 or the SEC. It's not it's college football. It's not Big 10 SEC football. And I think eventually we will get there. But we're not there yet. So why are we changing the college football playoff to accommodate it already? That does bother me a little bit.
Okay. So this is let's have a numbers discussion at the moment, because this is the thing. This is what drove me nuts. There are people around college football who are idiots. And there are people, I swear, there are people who think their favorite thing about college football is losing, is punitive losing. I've talked about this before. It's like, oh, you know what? The regular season matters so much in the sport. You know what I love? I love a team losing a close game in September and their national title chances disappearing. Oh, I love it. Well, what about the bands? What about the pageantry? What about the connection to your team that feels like the team is part of your family? What about the great accomplishments of these players on the field? What about the strategy? What about no. I just like punishing people. Did you not see reaction from people who were like, oh, 14? Whoa, why don't they just kill the sport? Go to 14. Like, just let everybody in now. Didn't you see some of that reaction?
Yeah, I've seen that reaction every time when the playoff was first established, and then every time there's a conversation about expanding it. Yeah.
And what do you think when you read that? It came across my timeline on Twitter. Do you read it and think these people are idiots?
Yeah, or at least they're like hyper reactionary. Yeah, like I don't agree with them. Yeah.
Show the numbers. This is how many teams in every major North American sport make the playoffs. In the NBA, more than half make the playoffs, and that's just talking about the actual playoffs. That's not even the play-in game, which makes it even, which like takes it up above 60% if you include the play-in teams. This is just 16 of 30, right? Okay, more than half in the NBA. The NHL, half the teams make it. The NFL, 44% of teams make the playoffs. Major League Baseball, 40% of teams make the playoffs. March Madness for the men, right? 68 teams. There's 351, I think, teams playing that level of major college basketball. That's 19% of teams making the postseason, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, there's 134 teams playing major college football. 12 get in. That's 9%. That's 1/4 compared to all the pro sports. It's half of who make it in basketball. If you expand it to 14, you'd let 10% of the teams in. Why do people react like they do to expanding the college football playoff? It's crazy to me. This is still the best regular season. It's still the most difficult postseason to make. And yet, if to go from 4 to 12 or 12 to 14, people act like you're ruining the sport when the NBA and the NHL and the NFL and Major League Baseball have ruined their regular seasons. Their regular seasons are absolutely meaningless because anybody with a pulse gets in. And then once you get there, it might be like, oh, yeah, the 7 seed just got hot and beat the 1 seed and rendered 7 months of stuff moot. Why do people react like this to expanding opportunity in college football?
I mean, it's just because it's different. Like it's not the way we've done things. I guess it was like a badge of honor for college football to be the one sport that was structured differently. I don't view it that way. Like I thought it was, or have thought it's been more ludicrous that college football. And that's not to say that it hasn't been more like professional sports, because that's not really what I want. But like its method of choosing a champion was like so far different than the rest of really the major sporting world. Like not even just North American sports. Like no one does it the way that college football did it. So, and even now, like the small percentage of teams that get in, like 4 out of 131 or whatever it is minuscule, and even 12 to your point, or 14 or 16 would not be all that large of a group of the total teams playing major college football. But like that to me is like a step in the right direction. It's a better method of determining a champion. So the pushback against it to me has always felt a little bit odd, other than I guess it's 2 things. Like 1, people don't like change, and 2, there are sickos out there who get the most enjoyment out of punitive losses, as you said.
And then the other thing is, so we understand that, okay, so I can use the number 134 teams playing Division I football. It's really about the power conference teams, right? So
Yeah,
but
it's like
even
60,
if you do that, there's 68 power conference teams. Even if you expand to 14, that's going to be 13 of those 14 spots going to power conference teams. We just know that. There's going to be 1 automatic bid for the group of 5, and they're not going to take any at-large group of 5, okay? You know what 13 of 68 is? 19%, which is what college basketball is at, and which is still half of every pro sport. So even if you try to twist the numbers, it's still the best regular season. And I want somebody who had a negative initial reaction to this. I want to discuss this with them And I want to hear what their thing is other than, oh, the value of the regular season, but like explain it to me how you actually mean that. Because this is one of those things like, right, we all have opinions. We have opinion shows. People are watching, watching sports talk is all opinion. This is fact. The numbers are facts. And I think you are like factual. I think your opinion is factually wrong. If you think going from 12 to 14 is like, well, that's it. Or that, like, even if you think going from 4 to 12, if you're a 4 truther still, and I was once upon a time, but I've seen the light. I had a visceral reaction to people. Just a couple. It was just like,
What if it
we love punishment. We love punishment.
Yeah. If the argument about it taking away from the regular season is that, like, did you see what Matt Rule said? I think it was last week about, like, why would we ever schedule a good non-conference opponent with the league that we play in, and the fact that the playoff is so long now, like, does it make any sense to do that? Like, if we start losing games like that because of the expanded playoff, would you hear that argument or no?
Teams need to play good games. I hope, and this is why, again, one of those where let's hold this discussion for a second, because there's a point that I want to make about regular season scheduling does matter, but I don't know that it's definitive that expanding the playoff and realignment like decreases the incentive to schedule good in the non-conference or increases it. I think you can debate that.
Sure.
I am in favor of everybody playing at least one good non-conference game against a team you wouldn't normally play that gets people excited. So, but I wouldn't agree with Matt Rule that we are heading towards a place where we're disincentivizing that. I think depending on what we do, you could incentivize that. So let's talk about the idea of whether what the SEC and the Big Ten are trying to do here, right? Because that really is the specificity here of there's a Power 4, but there's obviously a Power 2 within the Power 4. The idea to expand to 14, they just want an extra Big Ten and an extra SEC team in there every year. So they want the playoff to be a group of 5 team, the Big 12 champ, the ACC champ, and then everybody else is from the SEC and the Big Ten. So right now, that would be 9 spots for the SEC and the Big Ten. They would like to get to a world where there's 11 spots for the SEC and the Big Ten. And there's been some discussion that reportedly in that meeting of maybe having automatic qualifiers, that the Big Ten and the SEC would maybe be guaranteed 4 spots a year, that if you finish in the top 4 or whatever. You don't like that? Like, would you prefer? Should it be right now that the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Big 12 are all treated the same, are on equal footing? Let's see how the teams play during the regular season. Would you push back against the idea that the SEC and the Big Ten are trying to run this thing?
Would I push back against that they're trying to? No, I think they are trying.
No, that they should. Like, you're mad at them.
No, that they should.
They're
yeah,
naughty.
no, I don't.
They're being mean. Yeah.
No, like, I do think they're being a little bit mean. Like, I don't know. Like, if there were, there's no question like that both those leagues are better than. Like, I'm not trying to say that the SEC and the Big Ten aren't, deeper, more competitive leagues than the Big 12 and the ACC, certainly the ACC. And I understand, I guess, the point of view that on some level you should be like rewarded for that, but there's not, like, we went through and did our like schedule or win total over unders. Like, looking at some of the Big Ten schedules, like, I don't want to create a system where a team by luck of the draw in the Big Ten only ends up having to play like 1 or 2 of Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon, Washington, UCLA, and USC, because like there are schedules that are built that way, and then all of a sudden you have a team that's 10-2 with a playoff, quote unquote playoff caliber record that automatically gets into the playoff because it just happened to play in the Big Ten, even though it only played like 2 good teams all year. Like, that system sounds like it sucks to me. So I would be not at all in favor of giving either of those leagues automatic qualifiers by virtue of playing in those leagues. If you want to expand the field because you think that those leagues there should be more opportunities for those leagues to get more teams in, like, I guess I'm okay with that. Or I guess I could be persuaded to get on that side of the argument, but I don't. The world where like we're guaranteeing things just because of the conference that you play in, short of you winning a championship, to me like is kind of ludicrous.
All right, let me create a hypothetical for you.
Okay.
Say we did get to a point where the SEC and the Big Ten said, like, listen, man, come on. This is just the way it is. You can either do what we say or we're just going to go do our own thing. Good luck. If they said we want guaranteed 4 spots. So as it stands right now, starting in 2026, we want 4 for the SEC, 4 for the Big Ten, and then 1 for the group of 5 guaranteed. Now, that would, in the 12-team playoff, leaves 3 spots. So we're going to leave 1 for the ACC champ, and we're going to leave 1 for the Big 12 champ, and then that's 1 other spot, right? Or we can expand to 14, and now we'll have 4 SEC, 4 Big 10, 1 group of 5, 1 Big 12, 1 ACC, and there's 3 extra spots to figure out. If that's the idea behind wanting to expand, like the ACC, the SEC and the Big 10 are saying, like, well, it's basically like codifying what will probably happen anyway. Because I think when we talked about how many SEC and Big 10 teams do we think are going to make the 12-team playoff, I think we said like 7 or 8, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we expect anyway. So they're just going to say we want a guaranteed 8. Would that be, are they being magnanimous then by saying, hey, let's expand to 14 so there's still more room for you guys? And then also we got to figure out how Notre Dame fits into that, because like if all of a sudden like Notre Dame's fighting for 1 spot, then it's like, what?
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like that could be part of the rationale behind 14. Like, listen, we're so big and there's so many good teams. If you don't lock us into at least 4, we're out. But we're willing to expand if you lock us into 4. Look at that. They're not
kind of
nice.
Yeah, that's a heck of a way to spin it. I think you should do PR for the Big Ten and the SEC.
I'm such a slappy for the big guys now. I don't know what happened. Really. We just want to make sure you guys are taken care of. 4 for us, but everybody. Yeah, I know.
No, if you want, honestly, if my response to if they want 4 for each of them, it's just like, then go do your own thing. You play each other. Your playoff is Big Ten and SEC, and leave the rest of us to play like college football. Then like go be NFL light. That's what I would say if I was in the room.
Yeah, because the other thing, I mean, obviously, the thing that's going to happen is that anybody in the ACC or the Big 12 potentially who like is like, whoa, like we don't want to be left out of that. They're just going to wind up in the Big 10 or the SEC eventually.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah,
right. So then it's going to be so. Also, what happens with this stuff is like, why did this stuff come out? It's because they throw ideas around, they leak it, they check the reaction, and then they come back. And so it's like, and this is like the thing. I mean, they went into the meetings and you and I did our first 12-team bracket, like what we think the playoff's going to be, like a month ago. And when we did it under the assumption that there were going to be 5 automatic bids, not 6, even though at that time, the thing in place was still 6 automatic bids for conference champs and 6 at large. And it was like, well, the Pac-12 doesn't exist anymore. They're going to change it. And then like the 2-team Pac-12 was like, well, we better. And it's like, no, there's like, they tried to rabble rouse and they, ran the mug against the bars of the cell, but it didn't work. So they rabble roused for a little bit, and then they changed it to 5 auto bids and 7 regular. And like, we're barely even talking about it here because of course that was going to happen. Yeah. So I think there's some rabble rousing going on here of like, let's aim high, let's threaten whatever, let's figure this out. I don't think this is what's going to happen, but it's like an indication of where the Big Ten and the SEC would like things to go. So
yeah,
I think that the sport, this show exists in part because we believe that the sport is dividing North and South, and that there really are going to be, in the end, kind of probably 2 powers. And my hope would be that means that includes as many. I want all of our teams included, right? Let's get West Virginia and Pitt and Utah or whatever, like in the Big Ten. Then, like I don't want people to be left out, but I also understand that we are still in the phase of everything's a step to somewhere else. And the Big Ten and the SEC. Do you believe that we are officially at the point where they are going to continue to throw their weight around like this? And we better get used to stories and proposals and things where it's like the Big Ten and the SEC want everything and they're going to threaten people if they don't get it. And maybe you'll be mad, but also this might be the new norm.
Yeah, I think it's not going to change, right? I think they will continue to throw the weight around. They just like they hold too many of the cards, right? Everyone just sort of has to go with what they want to do, or risk college football as we know it kind of blowing up and totally restructuring. And I think that's going to happen anyway. But I understand the impulse of like everyone else to kind of like delay the inevitable while they can. And while they're doing that, yeah, the Big Ten and the SEC are going to continue to kind of get their way and I think be pretty forceful about it.
Okay. Other playoff topics we want to get into. One, and this was sort of tied to the idea of potentially expanding to 14 is, and if they make auto bids, like, hey, we're going to get 4 from the Big Ten and 4 from the SEC anyway, would they maybe do away with conference title games? I think there is some push or pull here that it's like there is a maximum number of football games that a human body can play in a year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can play 30 football games a year, right? It's one of those things. That's how I always do things. It's like, well, why do you say that? It's like, well, could you play 70 football games in a year? They play 82 basketball games. Could you play 82 football games in a year? No. Okay, so there is a maximum. All right, could you play 40? No. Could you play 30? No. Could you play 20? Could you play, you know what I mean? Like, so there is a number.
What's the NFL's 21, right? If you don't have a bye in the playoff and you go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, you have to win 4. Yeah, if you're not the 1 seed, you got to win 4 games after a 17 game season. So yeah, 21 millionaires.
Mm-hmm.
So the conference title games, if you get rid of them, that eases expansion a little bit. And I just said I don't think they'll add a round, but actually, I mean, you could, they're obviously adding multiple rounds from a 4 team. Would you be in favor of whacking conference title games? And it feels like this has mostly been like a Dr. Pepper conversation or whatever it is. It's like, but what about the money that you get for calling it the whatever title game? And it's like, okay, well, we're getting gazillions of dollars from somewhere else. Whack them or keep them. Oh,
I would whack.
Mike and I had a conversation about games we want to play on the show. Whack or keep could be a good game.
Whack them or keep them. Yeah, we can do like a Sopranos theme and bring it in that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sopranos of the North. The Sopranos.
They are. Oh, for real. We actually, I mean, like we're gonna culturize everything in the world, North and South. So it's gonna be like I'm watching Justified now. Like I feel guilty. It's like it's in Kentucky. I don't know if I could be watching this. But then it's also like I'm not sure that Nick Saban should watch The Sopranos. So yeah, or at least Nick Saban's a son of the North. Kirby Smart can't watch The Sopranos.
Yeah, I was. I am on team like get rid of conference title games now. I think just because like I was in favor of keeping them as like a part of the playoff structure when there were actually 5 power conferences, and it was like if you play in your conference title game, like that's the first round of the playoffs kind of deal. But you can't do that now because of how big these conferences are, and there's fewer power conferences now. Like that, I think that would just be too much to kind of handle. So I would be in favor of getting rid of them, and I guess in turn that would mean like get rid of the buy that you would get for I don't know. I guess that's a little bit of a tricky situation, right? Because I like that while we have them still, there is incentive to play, or there is incentive to like strive to win them because as at least as it's structured now, you get a first round bye if you win your conference.
Right.
So I guess as long as a playoff is structured that way, then they still serve a purpose. But I'm mostly in favor of getting rid of them because I think it's too many football games, and that particular game seems a little unnecessary.
So if it is a trade-off, would you trade away the conference title games for like an extra playoff round or a playoff expansion, or would you rather keep 12 and keep the conference title games? Right? Because I do think what you're saying that it is maybe it's a trade-off. Which side of the trade would you prefer?
I think in a 12-team world where we still have the 4 auto qualifier buys, I would be team keep the conference title games.
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
I think I might be too. Here's the thing. As we lose so much in college football in terms of the local feeling of it, right? It's the nationalization of it. It used to be a regional sport. Now it's a national sport. This is a regionalization that remains, even though the region might be from Piscataway to the Pacific. Is it naive to think of a conference title game as a celebration of a conference? That like, hey, this is us. This is our thing. Our people are coming together. And the thing that not everybody has been all in on yet is the idea of like a divisionless world where, for instance, some of the Big Ten title games haven't been very good. It's because the conference there was inequity in the strength of the two sides. Now you're just going to get the two best teams. And other conferences have already experienced that. But the idea of like, we're guaranteed to get a game between the two best teams in this group of people, the group of fan bases, groups of universities that have decided to be together, we're going to get a banger. Like, should we give that away? Should we give that away in the name of another playoff round? Or
Well,
is
I kind of think you've already given it away,
No,
haven't you? Because if the game is Oregon, USC, and Indianapolis, like what is that? Like, that's not the picture that you're painting. We've already abandoned the regionality of it, which I think like allowed you to hold on to the thing that you're talking about. But especially for
you
the
think
Big
that's
Ten,
already dead?
For the Big Ten, it is. I think so. Yeah, like the SEC has maintained some semblance of regionality, like Texas against Oklahoma and Atlanta. I don't know. I guess that now that I say it out loud, that sounds pretty weird too. But even like Texas versus Alabama and Atlanta, or Georgia versus Oklahoma and Atlanta, that's a little easier to wrap my mind around than UCLA against Washington in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, right? So,
although they're going to move it around too, but even then, it's like, hey, it's the Big Ten championship and it's in Los Angeles. It's like,
so you're saying that like West Virginia versus Arizona in Dallas. It's like whatever, like a Big 12 title game. Like, what do you get?
Or Stanford versus Florida State in Charlotte.
We've already nationalized the regionality to such a degree that my imaginary world is dead. So what are we holding on to? So kill it with fire. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh man, big title games. Okay. The TV contract. It was reported like a week ago that like, hey, ESPN's gonna get the continuation of the TV contract. The current TV deal covers the next two playoffs, and then that will be the end of the 12-year deal that began with the 4-team playoff cycle. I mean, I don't even know who reported. Like, did ESPN? This is one of those where it's like, did ESPN report? Did ESPN got it? And then everybody else was like, no. Do you care who televises the expanded playoff? Like, is this a story that fans should care about? Because one of the things I'm very eager for us to do is not talk about inside college football mumbo jumbo financial garbage that the average fan actually doesn't care about. Should they care about where the games are on TV?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I would, if I were not a college football journalist and just someone who watched college football, I would draw some kind of connection, certainly, between like ESPN and the SEC and Fox and the Big Ten. And then if like one of those entities controlled the entire postseason, I don't think I could help but get a little conspiracy theory about who gets selected there. So like in the name of like everyone's like sanity, I guess when it comes to that, I do think that there should be balance between like who is actually broadcasting the playoff, even if it's only for like appearances and maintaining some sense of objectivity. I think that would be good for everybody. So yeah, I think it does matter a little bit. It would matter to me a little bit, like who controls that thing. Like I would rather it be a shared enterprise between like ESPN, CBS, and Fox than one of those three entities controlling it by itself. I
agree. I whether it is just perception, but I think there is some reality to it that in a world where ESPN's showing SEC games and they're having on those SEC broadcasts all year, they're talking about the playoff and having playoff commercials, and then on CBS and NBC and Fox and all the games that the networks that are showing, like everybody else is showing the Big Ten right now, for instance, but they wouldn't be talking about their own playoff productions and broadcasts. So I felt like this was one of the things that when we didn't get to the 12-team playoff as fast as people thought they were going to, I thought like everybody outside the SEC and ESPN like putting the brakes on. I thought the alliance was somewhat part of this, of like, you know what, let's just make sure that like the SEC and ESPN don't control the whole sport. And I think that remains a part of it. So I think it is worthwhile for the same reasons you said. I don't care about how much money they make. It's like, are they going to
Yeah.
make a gazillion or 2 gazillion? And some people are like, it's not as lucrative. It's like, whatever. Like everybody's going to have enough money, right? So, but I think it's better for the sport for it to be spread out just like it is in the NFL. Like it's one of these things, if it's going to be the NFLification of college football, then like, let's follow that plan a little bit, right? Like, can you imagine if the NFL was on one network?
Does the NFL for the Super Bowl, is that a bid process or they just rotate between the 3 major?
I think they rotate.
Okay.
I think it's a rotation. So yeah. Okay. Anything else about the playoff? Like, are you concerned about anything that's happening here? Like, do you think that things that happen in these discussions when it comes to the future of the playoff could hurt the sport substantially if they are decided a certain way?
I think it just worries me, like what I said earlier, like the already talking about 14 when you haven't even played 12 yet, just sort of, I don't know. It feels like indecisive to me. It feels like people don't really have a grasp on what they're doing, and it worries me a little bit that like the future of the sport is like kind of in the wrong hands. No, I don't know whose hands would be the right hands to be like. I don't have a suggestion for that necessarily, but there's just like there's like an element of this that feels like they're just sort of flying by the seat of their pants. That's like you don't really know what you're doing, and that worries me a little. Bit. It's less so like I'm excited about a 12-team playoff. Like I'm very excited about a 12-team playoff. I've been pro playoff expansion since we finally kicked that door in and got a playoff in the first place. So it's less about that and just more about like, it's kind of like everything. This feels like a little bit of a microcosm of everything that's changing with the sport at the same time. And like, are the right people in the right rooms making those decisions? And it's hard for me to feel confident that answer is yes.
Normally, you're only going to hear me tell the South to cram it on this show, but I will make a rare exception here. And I will say, if you are somebody who had a visceral negative reaction to 14 versus 12, based on the idea that that's just too many teams and you're ruining the sport, you can cram it. And also, I would be thrilled to come on your podcast or YouTube show or radio show and tell you why you're wrong, because you're just so desperately wrong. It's 10%, man. It's 10%. It's still the best regular season. All right,
is 14. Sorry, but is 14 like for you? Is like that? Is that a reasonable end game? Like, do you think they need to get to 16, or is there a number that they keep like kicking the ball or kicking the can? Excuse me, further down the road. Like, is there a number they ultimately need to settle on in your mind?
I can't imagine more rounds. Like at some point, I think more rounds would be too much. But all we're talking about is number of buys. So as we talk about buys, I think 12 is right. I like 12 because it does have some reward for the best teams. But the difference between 12 and 14 to me is negligible. And the difference between 14 and 16 is negligible. You're just pulling buys away and you're just creating more content. And so, like, if we're talking about 24 or like another round, then it's like, well, when are you getting like how you're not changing the calendar, right? By going from 12 to 14 or 12 to 16, you're just playing more games on the first weekend.
Yeah, they're not going to cut regular season games either. They're always going to play 12.
Yeah. So I mean, I do think there is a maximum number of games that you can tell college players to play, but I don't know that there's a maximum number of teams that should be in, right? So it really, to me, is about the rounds and the games. And then the more teams you add more rounds and games. But I mean, to be up in arms that like, because here's the thing again, that I think making the playoff for so many programs is going to be such a huge deal. And even there's a lot of teams, even in the SEC and the Big Ten, that just making the playoff and getting to play that one game is going to be like the greatest thing that ever happened in the history of that program. Imagine how Iowa fans would react to getting into playoff. Imagine how Ole Miss fans would react to getting into the playoff, right? It's still the haves, but I don't think it's as much about like the Ohio States and the Michigans and the Georgias and the Alabamas. It's like that next tier where like, they're not usually in there. So you're expanding opportunity for fan bases to be excited. And that those battles to get in, I think, enhance the regular season. I don't think it takes away, because all of a sudden now it's like you have 10-2 teams and maybe 9-3 teams with the chance that are like, holy moly, like, we're in mid-October, we're 5-2, we still got a chance, but man, we got to win because we have a chance to be the 12th seed in the playoff. Like, I think that's great. And again, like if you have an argument against that based on too many teams is bad for the sport, you're just wrong. Okay, when we come back, we got some like on-field stuff to talk about, starting with Iowa State. We'll do that next on Kings of the North. Back on Kings of the North. Thanks for watching us here on YouTube. If you're doing that, thanks for listening on your favorite podcast app. If you're doing that, if you'd like to drop a review on Apple Podcasts, we certainly would take that. I think that helps us. If you want to give us a thumb, it's a thumb, right? A thumb on YouTube. We'd appreciate. We love your thumbs. We just love your thumbs. So thanks for everybody. Thanks for being here, for being part of it. Thanks for helping spread the word. If you say, hey, I watched this new show, it's pretty good. At least that Landis guy is good. The other guy yells too much. Nathan Shieldhouse leaving Iowa State. We did a show, whatever it was, 2 weeks ago about the 30 head coach and coordinator changes among our 26 teams in the North. Now we have at least 31. How big of a deal do you think this is? He was only the offensive coordinator, the play caller at Iowa State for 1 year, but this feels like one of those things, which is one of the toughest things in sports, when it's like you sort of nurture a smart young person and then give them an opportunity and they're so good at it. It's like, congratulations, you did a great job nurturing and providing an opportunity here. And they were so good, you lost them.
Yeah. It's unfortunate for Iowa State. Like it does make me like not in a significant way, but like I think you have to maybe rethink a little bit what you might expect of Iowa State this year, only because it did seem like Nathan Shieldhouse in his 1 year did a pretty good job of like getting that offense to another level. I think they were 80. I wrote it down. They were 86th in offensive efficiency the year before, and they were 28th last year.
Yes.
Yeah, so like that's a pretty substantial jump in offensive efficiency in the FEI ratings for 1 year to the next. How much of that like is really credit to Nathan Shieldhouse? Like I don't know, probably not all of it, right? Iowa State has good players. They are still number 2 in the country in returning offensive production. Like that doesn't change now that they're losing their offensive coordinator. But I guess you worry a little bit about like, do you have the time if you're Iowa State? And the answer is probably no, to like go find the best possible replacement for him that you can get, because it's the end of February and spring practice is about to start. You're probably forced to do something in-house, and that's not to say that you don't have good options in-house. I'm sure Iowa State does, but I don't know that they would be like maximizing that spot now that they've been kind of dealt a rough hand at a bad time.
Matt Campbell's pretty good. Like, I think
I've
certainly had discussions with people over the years where it's like, I think like the wave of Matt Campbell has been like, oh man, like that guy's, just wait till the Michigan job opens. Matt Campbell's going to be the guy, right? That he's sort of been, as a Midwestern guy, success at Toledo, success at Iowa State. Like he's been sort of like the next guy up for a bigger job for a while, long enough that there was like a backlash, I think, to him. Reflecting on what's happening here, as you pointed out, they were 86th in offensive efficiency in 22. That was under Tom Manning as the offensive coordinator, who was, I think, a college teammate of Matt Campbell at Mount Union, had worked with Matt Campbell at multiple stops. They're 86th, and he fires him. He makes an offensive coordinator change and promotes this young guy who had been like the run game coordinator and the running backs coach, and not been the quarterbacks coach, even though Shieldhouse was a quarterback at Illinois. He'd been around. I think he'd been on the staff at Iowa State for 5 years. I maybe it's one of those where it's like, listen, we got to move this young guy up too. But they had a down year, and he immediately made a change with one of his good friends, and they went from 86th to 28th. But the 3 years previous to that, before they were 86th in offensive efficiency, in 2019, 2020, and 21, they were 18th, 16th, and 19th in the country. They were a top 20 offense for 3 straight years. They had a down year and they made a change, which is with a friend, which was like, okay, like Matt Campbell. So it also makes me think here, Nathan Shieldhouse got them back on track. They do have some internal candidates. There are some other coaches that were on the Iowa State staff previously, have gone on to other things that people theorize could be candidates to come back. I think Matt Campbell kind of handles his business with this stuff, man. And so this is a tough time to lose it, to lose a key guy. But they were pretty good in 19, 20, and 21 under a different guy. And so maybe it's internal or not. I don't know. Digging into this whole situation gave me like a double check on myself of like, man, I think Matt Campbell like knows how to like build a staff and run a program.
And he's also an offensive coordinator. Like that's what he was before he was the head coach at Toledo. So like, I suppose he could take some more responsibility on it. We'll see what happens. That would worry me a little bit. It's just a conversation of like, should the head coach also be the offensive coordinator? Like how many hats are you trying to wear? Is it too many? So I would hope that he's able to find somebody that is able to mostly keep that burden kind of off of his plate. But if they're not able to at this particular time, just because it's like a weird time to be looking for an offensive coordinator, it's not like the head coach isn't equipped to handle that either. So it's a point worth making. Like you're right, because I think some of the immediate reaction to this that I saw that I clearly kind of fell victim to myself was like, tough blow for Iowa State, man. I don't know if they're going to be able to get it done this year. And it's like, maybe pull back from that a little bit. It's a loss for sure because it did seem like Nate Shieldhouse was on the rise and like the kind of guy that was going to be like a pretty hot name, I think, in college football coaching searches, perhaps after this season if Iowa State did what we think they're capable of this year. But I don't know that it's a death blow to an otherwise promising Iowa State season.
You'd rather have this than have your staff get stale. So I think this is a sign. So, you think about Iowa State. They lose their offensive coordinator this offseason to the Rams, to Sean McVay being like, I like what that guy does. And they lost one of their defensive coaches, Tyson Veit, that people really like, to be the defensive coordinator at Cincinnati. So they lost two young, rising members of their staff. But what they have is, as you pointed out, and this is a super important point, they have an offensive-minded head coach who's always going to set the structure for how they're going to play offense. And they have a defensive coordinator in John Haycock who has been with Matt Campbell forever. And I don't know is maybe ever going to leave him, right? So that allows you to develop good young coaches. And frankly, for a place like Iowa State, the biggest compliment you can get is for your coaches to get hired for bigger jobs.
Yeah.
And I don't even mean better jobs, but bigger jobs for opportunities that you necessarily can't give them because you're not an NFL team and you can't give Tyson Veit the defensive coordinator job because you have a good defensive coordinator. And so as hard as it is, I would try for an Iowa State fan, I would try to take this as a sign of respect because people want your guys, even though it's tough to lose them. So, good for Iowa State. Good luck. Congratulations. I'm sure we can have Matt Campbell on.
Congratulations, Iowa State. Yeah.
Matt, but I would love to sort of have this. This is, as people know, you and I have spent a long time covering Ohio State football. And when you cover a place like Ohio State goes after the best for everything. And Ohio State does not lose out on what they want that often, right? There are not that many places where, of course, you get in recruiting battles and a kid picks Alabama or Georgia or Michigan or whatever over Ohio State. But when it comes to being able to pay coaches, providing opportunity for them to move on to bigger jobs later, become a head coach, that kind of thing, and recruiting, when you're in the process, you can just say, we're going to go for the best. There's no reason to not go for that. It is so much harder when you're at a place that is at a lower level than that. And that's not an insult to anything. It's acknowledging how difficult the job at a place like Iowa State is, because you have to hire coaches who are good enough to win at Iowa State. But if they're so good, you're going to lose them, just like this, right? Where at a lot of places, you don't, it's the top places, you don't fear that. The job of winning at the highest level at a program that financially or historically is not at the highest level is 10 times harder than winning at the top.
Absolutely. Yeah. But you make a really good point, though, about Iowa State with those two pillars of Matt Campbell and John Haycock. you're pretty well situated. Like you're better situated than a lot of your counterparts at that level. Like if you have that, and then you can say like we're going to be this, and then like an incubator for exciting
Yes.
young coaches that are going to be difficult to keep, provided that they do what we think they're capable of. But I don't know. I that's about as good of a spot as I think you could be in if you're a
Yeah.
program of that level.
I am fascinated by that idea of like being an incubator, right? And then, but those two pillars is super interesting. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about Northwestern, and this is when would you say over your time knowing me that I am kind of a jerk about stuff a lot of the time? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, but usually, but rightly so. I think you
Okay.
rarely miss the mark with being a jerk.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm getting soft because my Northwestern discussion is stop yelling at Northwestern because people seem to be angry right now that Northwestern is tearing down its stadium. And for the next 2 seasons, Northwestern will be forced to play a multitude of places for its home games because they're not going to have a stadium. One of the things that's been reported, the rival site that covers Northwestern and does a great job, reported that Derek Gregg, the AD, told a group of alumni in New York City that they were going to play a home game against Wisconsin this season at Lambeau Field in Green Bay, which is like, I think like 2.5 or 3 hours from Evanston. There is discussion right now of where they might play, for instance, the Ohio State game. Which reportedly was reported it's going to be played at Wrigley Field. We actually believe here at our company that that's not a done deal yet. Our good friend Matt Brown, who is great at this kind of stuff, has questions about that. Other people here like think it still could be Soldier Field, but they might play in like a 20,000 seat soccer stadium for a couple of their early season non-conference games. They're just in a tough spot, and they're getting some blowback on like selling home games to places that are far away. But what are they supposed to do?
Yeah.
Like, I don't, the sacrifice that Northwestern is making for the next 2 years to tear down what was an antiquated, sterile, bad stadium. They knew it, to build what is going to be a state of the art, smaller, but high tech, like kind of, I think, cool football stadium. This is the price of that. So what are they supposed to do? So like my answer, like for everybody like going nuts about like, I can't believe it's a cost of doing business, man. Yeah, they're going to play a game at Lambeau. Like, have fun. I get that it's
Yeah.
200 miles from Evanston, but like quit yelling at Northwestern.
I agree with you. Like it kind of sucks they have to like be a traveling circus for a while, I guess. But like the Lambeau thing to me is cool. Like
Yeah.
Lambeau's, I'd imagine, I've never looked, but I'd imagine it's hard to get a ticket to a Packers game. But Lambeau's a
Yeah.
place that I think any football fan would want to go watch a game, right? Go see a cool town like Green Bay that's like built around football. Go watch Northwestern play Wisconsin. And yeah, it probably will be a Wisconsin home game. But you know what else would be a Wisconsin home game? If you played Wisconsin at Ryan Field, it wouldn't be much of a difference. So I think it's a cool opportunity for fans and players to go play at a place like Lambeau Field, even if it's a little unorthodox. And I guess Northwestern would get, I don't know, it seems like a good financial move, right, for Northwestern to do that, because they would get the gate, I'm assuming, as if it were a normal home game from an NFL stadium. And the same thing if they were to play at Soldier Field, right? If they're going to play Ohio State there or anybody else there. I guess you run the risk of
they
like
they got to pay to rent the place, I guess, right?
Right.
So it's like
Yeah.
cost
And I don't think you want to play like I don't know, no offense, Indiana at Soldier Field and have 15,000 people in a 62,000 seat stadium, right? But like when it makes sense, when it's Wisconsin, when it's Ohio State, like yeah, absolutely go do it.
And I will be very curious what the new Northwestern Stadium in 2026, what it does for college football, because it's going to have like all those kind of amenities. I think it's going to have like I think it's going to have a retractable roof, but it's going to be smaller, that when and people know I went to Northwestern. My daughter is currently at Northwestern. So I've been to a multitude of games at Northwestern, and it can be a terrible place to watch football, and they're trying to do something about it. So yeah, it's going to be a little clunky. I think the games at Wrigley are really cool. It seems like for sure their season ender against Illinois this year will be in Wrigley. They've done that before. They played Iowa in Wrigley last year. The Ohio State game may or may not be in Wrigley. Certainly they'll play a couple games in Wrigley. I think certainly they'll play a couple games in Soldier Field. But then if they're trying to be, creative with some of the other solutions, it's just You're building something new, and I'm very eager to see what the new stadium is like. So just everybody relax. Sometimes people are like, I just like, well, what would you do? Would you play all the games in the 20,000 seat soccer stadium that they're going to have to play some games in just because like the Chicago area, Evanston alumni might be able to, like, the Chicago area Northwestern alumni can get there easier for a 20,000? Like, what's your solution if you're complaining about Northwestern playing a home game at Lambeau? Like, what would you do? I think it's a great solution.
I think it's a great solution. I think, and it's not, what you say, it's 2.5 hours. It's not like you're not playing in California. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, you're gonna get on an airplane and go watch them play. What did I, similar to how you were bothered by some of the reaction to the playoff expansion, I was bothered by the reaction to Ohio State potentially playing Northwestern at Wrigley Field. Like, they shouldn't do it. Like, I think it'd be awesome if Ohio State played at Wrigley Field.
So one of the things is, and I don't know that I realize this, Soldier Field is the second smallest NFL stadium. It's like 63,000 capacity. Wrigley Field football capacity is around 40. So it's only a 20,000 seat difference. And I just think playing in Wrigley's cool. So I understand that it's more seats, right? But I wonder, I don't know, the bang for the buck. And that's one of those games that it's close for Ohio State fans to go. I just don't know. Is the reaction that people don't want Travion Henderson running into a brick wall, but like it's okay if Cooper DeJean runs into a brick wall when Iowa plays there? Like, what is it? There's more NFL guys on Ohio State, so don't play them in the baseball stadium? Or is it just a capacity issue? But like, part of me is like, well, why does the visiting team get to have like that much of a complaint about there's not going to be enough tickets for the visiting team? I don't know.
Some of what I saw was like, I guess like the playing surface at Wrigley Field like has not been great for football games, but like it's not great a lot of places. So I don't think that's a much larger conversation, I think, about the kind of surfaces we should be playing football on. And while that's not uniform, like, why not play a game at Wrigley Field? Some of it I think was like from like, I don't know, media who would be inconvenienced by having to cover a game from a different vantage point in a baseball press box, or like the sidelines being on the same side of the field. Like, I don't care. It's not for us. The game's not for us. It's for the fans and the players. So like, if I don't know, I think it'd be a cool opportunity and experience for fans and players, but maybe I'm naive.
But listen, there's like the health and safety of the players is the number one thing for any playing surface. But there's been a lot of discussion at Ohio State, among other places, about turf fields and whether they're safe and whether you should play on natural grass instead. And so, like, if people want to have a conversation about, is this playing surface safe for players? Absolutely. Let's have that conversation, but let's have it holistically. And so I don't know. I hate when media, for real, the media was whining because they didn't like their vantage point was going to be. There is nothing.
I don't know where it's coming from. That's me making an assumption.
Sometimes the media, I don't know what to tell you, brother. All right. Penn State. It was floated. There was an idea floated by a trustee like a week ago. Hey, what if we rename the stadium for Joe Paterno, played in Paterno Stadium? It's not going to happen right now. And people, you went to Penn State. That doesn't mean, it just means sometimes you have a little bit of a better handle.
Yeah.
You covered Penn State for a period of time. What was this? Where does it stand right now?
I mean, there's still a lot of support for Joe Paterno in State College, in the Penn State administration. You know, it's a weird dynamic at Penn State because it's such a small town and the football program is like so big. Like it's I don't know. I know there are a lot of small college towns, but like it being a small college town, it being like kind of isolated and difficult to get to, just creates like a very interesting dynamic there. So there are a lot of people that still hold Joe Paterno in very high esteem at Penn State because that's what they grew up with. It's all they've ever known. And they kind of choose to remember, you know, all the good things and ignore the bad things that he was tied to there. So I'm not surprised that this happened. I actually thought it would have happened sooner, and I don't think it's going to go away. It's tabled for the time being. I guess like Jay Paterno made a speech at a trustees meeting last week and said he did not say like this isn't right, let's not do this. His message was more like this isn't the right time, and there's not really a lot of support for this, including from the university administration, like the president is not in favor of putting Paterno's name on the stadium or like making it Paterno Field at Beaver Stadium, that kind of thing. But I think there still remains a lot of support there and enough support there that this will be an issue that I think comes up, I don't know, every couple of years or so until there's a final decision on whether or not it's the right thing to do, or like the proper way, I guess, to honor the legacy of Joe Paterno, because there's just not a whole lot left there that does. Like, there used to be a statue outside the stadium. There's not anymore. The family name is still on the library on campus, but I think aside from that, there's not a whole lot there that like reminds you that Joe Paterno was the head coach there for as long as he was.
I think you know this about me. The girl that I went with to junior prom married a Paterno.
Yeah, not Jay, the other. Yeah.
So, so therefore, my opinion on colleges are terrible at naming stadiums. So, do people know that Beaver Stadium is not named for beavers? Or do you think most people think like Beaver Stadium? Oh, just there's beavers all over the place. I was tailgating outside Penn State Stadium. I got attacked by a beaver. Beaver Stadium. Do you think that's what people believe?
I think that there's probably a large number of people who think it is named for wildlife, and it's not. It's named for a former governor of Pennsylvania.
Do you know when that governor died?
Like 18 something, right?
1914. Why? He was like the president of the board of trustees. He was the governor of Pennsylvania, like for one term. Like, the idea that their stadium is named for that guy is stupid. It's ridiculous. They're awful. The name Ohio Stadium. So here's what and you should rename things like every 50 years. I don't think that you should name something because it's like, oh man, we built it in 1832, and like in 1832 there are only like 50,000 people in the United States. So everybody got something named for them. Sorry. And now we have to keep it named that forever. Rename stuff. Rename stuff for two reasons: to honor somebody more recent and important, or B, for money. I am very pro name your stadium for money, and then the fans just don't have to call it that. So you could rename Ohio Stadium, whatever, Hot Chicken Takeover Stadium, but you could still call it the Shoe, but you'd get like $5 million from Hot Chicken Takeover that you could give to the players. So I would go through, we can do this show, I would rename every stadium in the country. Because it's not, you wouldn't be breaking the law by not calling it that. You can call it a nickname, but like all the memorial stadiums that exist, there's memorial stadiums everywhere. Soldier Field. Oh man, who'd you honor? Soldiers. All of them? Like all the soldiers in the world? Like, is when you think like when a soldier goes to Soldier Field, are they like, man, these people really get it? Like nobody else appreciates the military, but calling this place Soldier Field, unless that name, actually, maybe that's named for Charles Soldier. Just like I think people think it's named for beavers. Is it named for Charles Soldier? I'm assuming it's named as a tribute to the military.
Yeah.
Sell your naming rights and give the money to the people playing the game inside the stadium. Or, yeah, I actually think the idea of naming it Paterno Stadium is great. If not for, the stuff. But like generally speaking, Florida State should play in Bowdoin Stadium. And Ohio State should play in Hayes Stadium. They should. Why not? Or Griffin Stadium. Why shouldn't they? Why should it still be Ohio Stadium? And Illinois should play in Juice Williams Stadium. I don't know, right?
They can play in Nathan Shieldhouse Stadium and get him to come back and be the offensive coordinator.
Who is the Xander Diamant? Is that Indiana, the guy who's Indiana quarterback?
Uh-huh.
Xander Stadium instead of Memorial Stadium in Bloomington. Like, so I like the general idea here. I think is correct. The specific idea of like the circumstances of that guy for this name, it's not the right fit. But generally,
what do you like better, Soldier Field or Municipal Grant Park Stadium, which is what it was called prior to being named Soldier Field?
Prior to Soldiers existing, when did they rename it Soldier Field?
In 1925, in dedication to soldiers who had died in combat during World War I.
Okay. Because otherwise people would completely forget World War I, right? If they didn't name that. How about Peyton Stadium? Oh, should Northwestern play Ohio State in Peyton Stadium? Who's that named for? The greatest Chicago Bear, or Gale Sayers Peyton? Like the Big Ten named everything with a hyphen for all their awards because they couldn't think of one guy. Sayers-Payton Stadium. You want to play in Sayers-Payton Stadium? That means something to people.
I want to play
Nothing
in
against
Sweetness
Rogers.
Stadium.
Sweetness. Fridge Stadium. Ditka Stadium. Justin Field Stadium. I'm going to have to change to Caleb Williams Stadium. That'd be really awkward. All right. Last one we'll talk about. James Laurinaitis, hired by Ohio State, 3-time All-American at Ohio State, one of 8 3-time All-Americans in Ohio State history. Had been an analyst, kind of maybe just like coach the linebackers last year anyway. Now officially is going to coach the linebackers. The general idea here, and I said I would try to look this up, and I didn't get to it. What do you think of having alumni on your staff? This is one of the greatest players in Ohio State history who is now one of their official 10 assistants.
I've always thought it was important at Ohio State, right? Because that's a team that I've covered. But like I think that logic would apply to every program, right? I think you especially now where roster management is so kind of dysfunctional. Like I'm not trying to be I don't know. I'm not trying to make it seem like something that it's not, but I think there is value in having people in your building who have an attachment to the place beyond just like, this is the place that gives me a paycheck, right? Like, and Ohio State has a few of those. And I do think it's valuable. Like, I don't know. I don't think you should like build your whole staff out of people like that. But if I were a college football head coach, I think I would want a former player or two from that program in a pretty high position of authority, even if it wasn't like a position coach like James Laurinaitis got hired to, like an analyst role, player personnel role, player development kind of role. Like I do think that connection matters.
I feel like it gets talked about a lot with head coaches, right? Jim Harbaugh, perfect example of it. Kirby Smart, perfect example of it. Scott Frost, when he went back to Nebraska, was a huge part of it. Didn't work. I think sometimes it's one of those things. When it works, when your head coach is an alum, when it works, it's the most glorious thing ever. But I think sometimes schools can be too eager to do that. But then I think sometimes they're not eager enough to fill out their staff with it. I think this sweet spot, I would say, I think every major college football team should have a former player as one of their 10 assistants. And I think the sweet spot is probably between 1 and 3. Now, if you happen to have 7 former players who are all super qualified to be on your staff, great. But I like with as many, most schools have former players who get into the coaching world. I just think it is really an integral part of like promoting your program and recruiting, of having like understanding in the building. And, Ohio State at its best is, for instance, has had guys like that. Luke Fickell was like a huge part of that. What Tim Walton has done in his 2 years being back, he's a former Ohio State player. Like he's absolutely killing it as an assistant at Ohio State. Like Mike Hart at Michigan. It makes so much sense for Mike Hart to be an assistant coach at Michigan. And I will pledge this. I will do the research, and on a future show in the next couple of weeks, I'll come back and I'll have the full list of our 26 Northern teams, how many alumni are assistant coaches for those teams. But I just think it's good business, man.
So do I. I'm actually surprised you don't have that already. I thought you would have been up till 4 o'clock in the morning compiling that list from all of our teams.
Justified. I know.
Yeah. That's more important.
I went out and ate Mexican food. But then it was good because I thought of something for what you eaten.
Nice. For next week.
For people who may not be aware of that, we on our Ohio State show that we do every week, we do what you watching, what you eating, what you thinking, which is just a chance for us to talk about life outside of football, and we're going to start bringing that to Kings of the North. So, like, if you're like what, so like Bill likes to talk about frozen pizza a lot. So like that's sort of like the cuisine that we prefer. And then we just talk about movies and TVs. And like Bill was very bothered this week about somebody like sitting at the gas pump and parking their car there for 20 minutes. Like that's the kind of deep thoughts we have. I love that kind of stuff. So anyway, here on KOTN, I think people can just get ready because it's coming.
Yeah.
People like if you've never heard it, Bill, how people are going to have their socks knocked off, aren't they?
They absolutely are. And I don't think that there's a more quintessential Kings of the North praise than Wisconsin brick cheese, and that's what we talked about on the latest rendition of what you're watching, what you're thinking, what you're eating.
I also will say, the other night when I was lying in bed before I fell asleep, I was coming up with ideas for like 15-second commercials for us to film to promote Kings of the North. And most of them are about people doing like Southern college football traditions and us walking up to them, like shaking our heads and throwing a KOTN hoodie at them and being like, we don't do that up here. So I think,
Yeah.
So I have some, I have some good ideas. One of them would be like people having fights about like horns up and horns down. Like, is that how you do the horns? Is that right?
Okay.
My horns?
Yeah. And then it's like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, oh, go Longhorns, horns down, go Longhorns. Like two people like having a fight like that about shapes they make with their fingers. And I was just like walking up and being like, what do you do?
Flipping them a bird.
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
It's not, and like the tagline is like, it's the North. We don't do that here. Right. Like,
are there any
like
Northern programs that do the hand sign things?
Like I am aware of, like, I don't want to be hypocritical with our criticism of Southern college football traditions and culture. But I don't know. Not as vigorously.
Yeah.
Like the idea that there's like penalties in the South for like, we do this with our fingers, but if you do this with your fingers, you're going to get a penalty. I don't think we have an equivalent of that in the North.
I don't think so either. No.
I also have one about poisoning trees. I don't think we poison trees in the North, right?
Well, we celebrate nature in the North. Yeah.
I just can't, like, I can't wait for you to deliver that line. Cause like you and I would be walking up, there'd be somebody like trying to poison a tree in the North. Like, I saw someone in the South do this. And you would just say, we celebrate nature in the North.
We celebrate nature.
Yeah. Throw them a hoodie. Kings of the North. Thanks to you guys for making this part of your week. Thanks to our great producer, Mike Urostowski. Makes us look good and sound good. A lot more stuff planned. We're going to start working more people through this show. So again, we're still growing, but we're so grateful that you guys are here for now. Kings of the North twice a week and even more in the future. He is Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.